Our next speaker is Martin von Wolfersdorff. Yesterday, Martin got to introduce me, so today I get to return the favor to him. So I can say he's a terrible person. I'm happy to call Martin a friend. I always admire his work ethic, his knowledge, and his expertise, and his deep understanding of the space in which he covers. I would call him the king of recovered carbon black, but I think as we're in Vienna, we need to change that to the emperor of RCP, so that's my new title for you. Martin is a consultant specializing in alternative rubber fillers and tire pyrolysis. He is in contact with over 320 tire pyrolysis companies globally and advises tire manufacturing associations, tire manufacturers, tire collectors, refineries, pyrolysis technology providers, and operators on the global tire pyrolysis industry and in the marketing of recovered carbon black. So please give a warm welcome to Martin.
Thank you. So my presentation is pretty much in line with Martin's presentation from Cabot. I will talk about sustainable carbon blacks and let's say an external view on where are we with sustainable carbon blacks. My presentation is quite lean, so it is not very data driven, but I have some key messages for you. First of all, Wolfersdorff Consulting, what do I do? So I work with clients on carbon materials that include carbon black, of course, recovered carbon black, nanomaterials, graphene, nanotubes. I'm the founder with Smithers of the Recovered Carbon Black Conference. And as a third part, you might have seen me on YouTube and LinkedIn, because I think I want to show the public and the consumers more about carbon black, about the rubber industry, about tires, and also about the sustainability aspects of all of these industries. Now, this one, let me tell you a little story. Those of you who have been in my workshop know the story already. When I moved 2017 to Berlin, I was really surprised to have a former carbon black plant just in my backyard, you know, like 500 meters from my home. This is a Rußwerk Oranienburg. Back then in the 30s in Germany, there were 22 carbon black plants. And the reason I'm mentioning this here in the context of sustainable carbon black, I now feel that while I personally believe the furnace process is there to stay, I see many other processes complementary to the furnace process, not necessarily competitive, but complementary. And I'll tell you the reason in a moment as well. And I think today we have very exciting technologies. Methane was in the mix, decarbonization carbon black, to actually be complementary to the carbon black from furnace process. So my agenda is I will start talking about sustainability credentials. What is sustainable carbon black? Because we have to define it. I will talk about methane pyrolysis blacks. There's a crowd of you here in the room active in that area. Recovered carbon blacks, of course, circular carbon blacks, renewable carbon blacks, other materials of interest. And then I will give a global capacity and outlook with a call to action. Now, sustainability credentials, I think we have to remind ourselves the most important sustainable credentials are those that are understood by the consumer. It was already mentioned. And the second one is those credentials that are acknowledged by the policymaker. Because without the consumer who pays a higher price for a sustainable tire, and without the policymaker who makes laws and regulations that enable us to have a circular economy, it will not work. And then, of course, we have the obvious sustainability credentials, circular content, percent renewable content, and we can measure that by the C14 content. And of course, the CO2 or CO2e emission in the scope 1 to 3. I love scope 1 to 3. I would love to see more of this, not the avoidance LCAs, which I don't think tell the right story. Now, methane pyrolysis blacks, it's a very exciting area. And we have to give credential to Monolith to really start the whole journey disrupting. Monolith nowadays is not a startup anymore, 300-400 employees, and we can watch them. It's an exciting journey. We have rapid growth in that industry. There is at least 26 and more companies in that space. That data set I have with the help from Terje Hohn at Seed in Norway. There are actually more, but I'm just looking at the companies that really want to commercialize the carbon, because that's what I'm interested in, and that's what you are interested in the context of sustainable carbon blacks. There's only 4 companies that are over technology readiness level 5, so, and that is R&D. 6 of them are using a catalyst. That can be problematic because then you get a carbon material with 15% iron, and that is not very close to the carbon black. That is actually close to a recovered carbon black which has an ash content, and that makes, of course, the marketing of this kind of material a little bit more expensive or a little bit more complex. 7 are utilizing a plasma, 7 are utilizing a melt, either a salt melt or a metal melt, and 7 other technologies. In the room today, maybe you can raise your hand. We have Hycamite, we'll hear from them. We have Hyrock, we have H-Iron, we have Levidian. Peter, where are you? Not there? And we have Monolith. So it's present in our conference and in the industry. The interesting thing is about the different types of the carbon materials that industry produces. And I always tell as well the recovered carbon black industry as this industry in specific, you cannot beat the mass balance. In this case, we have 75% output is the carbon material, 25 is hydrogen. Of course, hydrogen is the sexy, exciting material that everyone wants, and it might be the key for decarbonization. For all our decarbonization efforts, we will need hydrogen. How do we get the hydrogen? Methane pyrolysis is a nice process, but we have to market the carbon, we have to valorize the carbon. We cannot just forsake the carbon. So carbon is king, and we have different carbon forms in that industry. We're producing anything between a char, a carbon black, a graphene maybe, or even nanotubes, which are probably the highest structured or the highest value form of carbons produced by that process. What I find interesting, some of these companies are product companies. So they take a raw material, they have a process, convert, and they sell the products, hydrogen and carbon. What I find interesting, and I have to disclose, it's a client of mine, but I'm not supporting them because they pay me. I'm supporting them because I believe there's some scope in there. Decarbonization as a service. I mentioned it in the workshop as well. So they install their device on any plant that is producing high carbon emissions and burning maybe a natural gas, methane, and part decarbonize that gas, take the carbon out, make graphene. You can use the graphene in the tire and the rubber. And the interesting thing is the gas has the same or even slightly higher energy content because the links between hydrogen are higher energy content than the links between carbon and hydrogen. So you take material out and you even have more energy in the gas you burn and less carbon dioxide emissions. So that, I think, is one of the puzzle pieces of decarbonization. However, it's not all shining sun. There are challenges as well. And as you've seen, the carbon materials are very different in this industry. So we have a total lack of standard. We have one company that hit more or less, maybe not 100%, but 99.9% carbon black specifications and application performance. The other companies, when you have a graphene, there's a real lack of standard. And what I learned is graphene is not graphene, is not graphene, is not graphene. When I talk to tire makers, oh, we tried graphene, but graphene is not graphene. And the same is recovered carbon black is also not recovered carbon black. So lack of standards make the scale up quite difficult. Now, moving on to recovered carbon blacks, it's a very short slide. You know we have a conference for that, so we can talk about details in November. Last year was a difficult year for the industry. Luckily, this year it looks good. We have progress, we have more, we have investment from carbon black. Last year we had market volatility. Investors really had cold feet about investing massively into the supply chain of recovered carbon black. And that is what the industry needs, massive investments in the assets, not in the equity. And so we had geopolitical tensions. And that slowed the industry progress. I say 2 years, it might actually be more than 2 years. And we see really two different worlds. In Asia, recovered carbon black is not that much known as a product, but tire pyrolysis is really growing massively. In the West, we have more sustainability, ecology paradigm, and the plants are very expensive. We're talking 50 million, 100 million, it's very difficult to finance these kind of plants. We have two different worlds, and we have to find a way to combine for the East to make a true recovered carbon black, and for the West to scale up industrialization. And safe to say, even the leading companies, or what we perceive as the leading companies, have massive issues finding investment. And so that is a big problem. For me, a highlight, ASTM classification was mentioned even this morning. I think is key to RCB commoditization. Commoditization, you can take it as pejorative, but for RCB, it is actually the key for the industrialization. A tire maker doesn't want to have a single source recovered carbon black from one supplier that he cannot get from any other supplier. He wants one product category, and this is what we get with the ASTM classification. It could be a great name like R2426, and then hopefully we have several suppliers. Hopefully we have within that category the same quality. Next one is circular carbon blacks. Now, this is really the Siamese twin. We don't have circular carbon blacks without the recovered carbon black. We have to realize they're linked. So the tire pyrolysis company needs to sell everything they produce. They cannot just sell the oil and cherry pick. They have to valorize everything. Again, you cannot beat the mass balance. What is interesting is the circular carbon blacks are chosen to be hard blacks because recovered carbon black is already playing in the semi-reinforcing space. So the circular carbon blacks tend to be 200 and 300 grade of carbon black, predominantly hard blacks. Credentials can be mass balance attributed or on product level. We had an exciting discussion at Zurich. There was an activist in my panel, which I moderated, and actually went quite well. We could have even had a more exciting discussion, but we comforted that activist so much that she was actually happy with the circular industry. And the point was, she said, they don't accept the green credentials at product level if physically in the product there is no circular content. But we had Celso from Orion, and actually in the black cycle, Orion put physically in, made 100% circular products, true with 100% TPO, not by mass balance. So we got the both ways. We can go mass balance, or we can take pure TPO. Of course, the mass balance allows when we don't have enough raw material, we don't have the supply chain, we don't have the tanks and everything for that material. We need the mass balance to grow the business. Availability depends again on the market of recovered carbon black. We have Siamese twins. What is interesting, what I mentioned in my workshop, circular carbon blacks are also part renewable. This is the natural rubber in the passenger car tires. It's a tiny amount, but TPO can have between 40, if you have passenger car tires, or 76% biogenic content from the natural rubber. Lamentably, if you want to use that in the LCA for circular carbon blacks, we also have to consider the whole LCA of tires, which is, in my own calculation, about 70 tons. So the -2 plus 70, we're at a very high level. I don't think that can be, the biogenic content is that helpful in tire pyrolysis. Renewable carbon blacks, they seem to be the sweet spot because immediately we have, in my calculation, -6, might be minus 5.62 around. So we start the whole waterfall with a negative. We can add, and we're surely adding in scope 1 and 2 for the furnace process. And we still stay negative. We still stay negative by 1.4 tons. Again, drop-in alternatives, predominantly hard blacks. Credentials, again, mass balance attributed or on product level. I learned, I was a little bit confused 2 weeks ago. I learned that Orion has 2 patents, and it seems that space is blocked. So I'm unsure whether other carbon black companies are doing a lot of renewable carbon blacks because of those two Orion patents. And the Orion product is Ecorax Nature, produced in the small plant of Orion in Jaslo, Poland. Next one, other materials. What else do we have? Already mentioned as well. For example, Cabot has a blend of RCB with furnace carbon black. Of course, Cabot calls it reclaimed carbon, not RCB. And we have different, and other companies have that too. We have different methods of mixing. So in process and before pelletizing, that is what Billa is doing. In my understanding, in the pelletizing water is what Cabot is doing, and Makrochem, the Polish transloader, is mixing the pellets. And there was a big discussion whether the pellets would demix because recovered carbon black is a little bit denser than normal carbon black over a long truck transport. But I believe that is not really true, that pellets are completely demixing. The one thing is, those blends, there's major tire producers, and I believe one might be here in the room, who do not like those blends. They like to have pure materials, direct contact to recovered carbon black producers. What I find also refreshing is the noise process. We will hear from Gay a little bit later on, which is carbon made from carbon dioxide. The company is Solid Carbon Products. Again, for that we need hydrogen, and the methane pyrolysis companies might be able to deliver this kind of hydrogen, so we can put up ecosystems, like I mentioned in my workshop. Also of interest, carbon nanotubes, of course. And these materials, they might all be complementary in a way that we can use RCB, which is deficient in reinforcement. We add nanotubes to make up for some reinforcement, and this is already being done, for example, in Asia. Other materials also mentioned by my colleagues from Conti, for example, lignin fillers. Here we have 40% carbon content, and for us the carbon content really is what brings the performance. On the flip side, I would say if you don't have enough carbon, maybe we have oxygen, and maybe we have hydroxy groups. So maybe these materials, maybe we can salinize and functionalize, just like we do with silica. Nanocellulose has 60% carbon. I don't see a big market inroad at the moment, but it could be interesting material. Now, what I do with clients, and you see the chart over here, I'm a little bit in the way, is market mapping. And I put only 3 things here on the market, and the one is like amusing. Most of the small startups and most of the nanomaterials are in what I call the mascara market. So the women among you know how expensive mascara is. Part is the brand, of course, but what I call mascara market is products that cost between $1,000 and $10,000 per kilogram. And surely nanotubes, single-wall carbon nanotubes are there, graphenes, nanocrystalline materials are in the mascara market. And the availability is faint. This is a double logarithmic chart. So carbon black is somewhere in the middle as a commodity. It is not as much a commodity as coal, which is the world's biggest commodity market, and of course has the cheapest price or value. Now, some figures, and actually, you know, this made me think, what is the outlook? Last year, 2023, global capacity, methane pyrolysis, when we take monolith, 14,000, maybe the run rate is not 40,000, it will be some 80% of that. RCB capacity, again, 90 kilotons of what I would call RCB globally. Renewable carbon black is difficult. There's no official reports, no public reporting. I cannot see it be more than 5 kilotons. Also, we have to think renewable carbon black is perhaps 3 to 4 times more expensive than normal carbon black. Circular carbon black is linked to the RCB, but I give it some 8,000 tons capacity last year with the active companies like Orion, Cabot, Tokai Carbon, for example. So I would say total capacity for sustainable carbon black last year was 117,000 tons. This is under 1% of the global demand last year. When we take Paul Eiter's figures from the World Carbon Black Data Book. What is even raising more concern for me is I looked at, okay, how can it grow? How can methane carbon black grow, recovered carbon black, renewable, circular? I don't see it growing much more than 5% by 2033 and not much more by 8% in 2043. And I think the major challenge I mentioned in the beginning, we need the consumer to pay for these end products that contain these kind of materials. We need the policies, and we heard Adam McCarthy from ETMA. Those policies need to support the industry instead of slowing down the industry. But the major challenge for me is the investments in the supply chain structure. I really like it when carbon black companies engage with, for example, recovered carbon black. We've seen this Alpha Carbon and Orion. However, I would say this is an equity investment, and I would invite the industry to invest much more, much bigger amounts, and not in equity, but in the assets. We need the plants, and the plant is costing 100 million if you want a decent big plant. So there are billions to invest in the supply chain if you want to have sustainable carbon blacks that are much more than a single-digit percentage of carbon black. And again, it's complementary. It's not competitive. I believe the carbon black industry has a big interest in investing in there. I don't think the furnace process will be replaced in the near or medium future by any other process. I think those processes, they can work together. So we're close to the coffee break. You can already see the coffee. I have four advertisements to do before I leave you to the coffee break, or maybe some questions. The first one is, Paul has mentioned, we've written a report, Prospects for Recovered Carbon Black. Honestly, last year's report might be obsolete by now, so we'll do the new one in the middle of this year. It's a peer-reviewed report between Paul and I, and we really think it's the most objective report there is. The second one is, this summer I'm launching Top Carbon, and this is to implement the ASTM classification with the industry. So we'll produce several types of recovered carbon black with several producers. I have interest from tire industry, from many rubber companies. They will test different ASTM RCB types in their applications, and I will do a market mapping. This grade, for example, R2426, is working in profiles, is working in inner liner, is working whatever, and this will give really a market map where RCB can be used within the categories. Also, whether the categories really make sense, meaning that within one category, do we really have the same rubber performance? And then we have two conferences. The first one is Recovered Carbon Black Asia this year in China. So we'll have two Recovered Carbon Black conferences, one in Qingdao. We'll have a pyrolysis plant visit over there as well, which is a first. So EcoStar, part of Double Star Tire, are opening the kimono, will show us the plant. And then we have, of course, Recovered Carbon Black in Amsterdam. So I hope to see you to these events, and I welcome your questions.
We have plenty of time for questions. Are there any out there?
Good morning once again. I just would like to ask you that I've seen you that for the last 2 years going in depth into this recovered technology. Would you technically call it a recovered carbon black or recovered black?
Okay, so the funny thing is, the funny thing is, when I introduced what I do, you have seen, when I talked about content creation, you've seen the interview with Bella Carbon on the tire technology. And that was a talk with John Davidson and Joe Hallett. And Joe Hallett is Bella Carbon's recovered carbon black expert, or sustainable materials, sustainable carbonaceous materials expert. So, and they accused me for the name recovered carbon black actually came from Joe Hallett. So, safe to say, recovered carbon black is not recovered carbon black. Recovered carbon black is a composite material of a mixture of carbon blacks from the tire's feedstock, depending on the tire feedstock, some inorganic material, some would call it ash content, and organic material, both volatile, hopefully not, and also some fixed carbon which comes from the carbonization of the polymer. We cannot avoid converting some of the polymer in the thermal process into carbon. And that carbon definitely is not carbon black. So as a summary, you cannot call it carbon black at all. But I would suggest we stay with recovered carbon black because we've been using that for so long, and by now everyone knows recovered carbon black is not carbon black, and you cannot use it as a drop-in, as Hubert Hirschlag from Conti has said. It's not a drop-in solution, and it's not carbon black. So I hope that answers.
Actually, this is the hot topic. So whichever conference we go, people like somebody called it charred black. I suppose put a different tire company guys in India and abroad. So somebody referred to charred black, somebody called it something completely different. So thanks for this clarification. Thank you so much.
You know, it will be easier when we have the ASTM classification, because then we can actually go away from recovered carbon black and we can call it R2426, R2436, and we can call it really what it is, and then everyone knows what it is, because the rubber industry thinks like that of the furnace carbon blacks. N660, you have very defined performance quality. And we want to get the same for recovered carbon black. And then we can actually get rid of the name recovered carbon black.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
I would say also, you know, it's not, in the furnace black industry, every company has a different term for their specialty blacks line. So it's well established that they may call similar products different things. So I think it's well established. Thank you, Tamar.